Oh, Chris Franks, it's good to. How was your spring break? I actually missed the music from How to Founder. Like I was like, oh yeah, I remember what this feels like. Spring break is over, and for us in Colorado, and we're back.
We're back. It was great. Jess and I, we went to Munich and Prague and did some sightseeing and prepped for my upcoming study abroad trip there. Turns out Europe, pretty cool. I will say, don't travel to Europe for 5 days. That is a lot of flying. A lot of flying to be there for 5 days. Who's there?
Europe.
Europe who?
No, Europe who. Sorry. Thought I'd kick things off with my worst dad joke ever.
Going great so far. Anthony, what traditional hiring practices are actually slowing down your business growth rather than accelerating it? 1937.
Oh, that was a rhetorical question. I was about to answer it. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
This is what we do. We ask you a question.
It's been a while.
It has been. In 1937, Ronald Coase published The Nature of the Firm, arguing that companies hire employees instead of contractors to reduce transaction costs. What Coase couldn't predict was how technology would eventually invert this equation. Today, platforms like Upwork process over $2.5 billion in freelance work annually, making transaction costs nearly zero and challenging the very foundation of why we built traditional companies at all. Today on How to Founder, Anthony, we're talking about growing with full-time employees. I'm Chris Franks.
Growing without full-time employees.
Without full-time employees. Exactly.
You said with.
I just left out that last word.
Out. Because, you left out.
I love it. These are going great. It's good. We're talking about growing without full-time employees. I'm Chris Franks. It's Anthony Franco, and we're joined today by Liz Steblay. Liz became a solopreneur before the word existed. After being laid off, one call landed her first consulting contract, making more money, working fewer hours, and spending more time with her daughter. She founded Proco Agency, connecting independent consultants with Fortune 500 clients, and later to launch Pika to help others start solo businesses. When not teaching entrepreneurs how to thrive independently, she's riding her Ducati motorcycle or playing golf or skiing, which is, I think skiing's kind of badass too.
It can be.
Yeah. Welcome, Liz. Apologies up front. Our normally, sophomoric humor. We haven't seen each other in a week or so. So
you have it all pent up.
Yeah, it's all devolved and everything. So let's just start off with the question: how should I be thinking about this? In the opening, we talked about it. Kind of traditionally, we think about a company as hiring employees. Is that even valid anymore? Is even this concept something that we should consider, or should we just look at building things entirely by contractors?
Well, I think you're talking about two different extremes, like having employees or only having contractors, when in reality, it's going to depend on the company that you're building and growing and what your objectives are. But so there is no answer, but the lines are blurring for sure. There's a lot more, I call it plate tectonics, where the ground is shifting beneath us, and more companies are realizing that they don't need to hire full-time talent, including leadership talent, and that we're moving to a world where work is more flexible, and it's better for everybody, in my opinion.
I think the other piece of this equation, and it's one that I think we should kind of lead with, is that there's all kinds of research showing that modern employees, so people that are younger than Anthony and I, which is most people, because we're very old, but people that are younger than us, they really value that sense of freedom and flexibility that comes with being a contractor. Is that something you're seeing as well?
Yes, but it's not just younger people, us older people appreciate it too. I think really what spurred this or gave it a little bit more juice was the pandemic. When we didn't have to commute and spend 2 hours a day commuting back and forth to and from work, when we could get our workout in the middle of the day and live our lives in a more blended fashion. I think coming out of the pandemic, people realized that, okay, that old model of commuting and trying to just do my job between 9 and 5 or 8 and 5, that it doesn't need to be that way anymore. So I think it just instinctively we're looking for more creative options.
Got it. So I think that the first question for us as founders, Anthony, why does this make sense? Like, what if you hired a bunch of contractors in the past, or what did you think as far as the balance there when you're thinking about solving this problem about employees versus contractors?
So I think, yes, I have. I've done both. I probably have a counterintuitive take on this, and that is hiring employee. You don't have to. If you hire somebody full time, the setup work is less because you can expect an employee to kind of figure out things as they started. You have a job description, you have a department. Like let's say you hire a graphic designer, and getting them up to speed, they can go talk to the rest of their teammates or other people, or they can ask you questions because they're dedicated full time and trying to figure out how to get themselves incorporated into your system. And there's by default there's time. They're full time 40 hours a week or plus or minus. And you have time for them to get themselves up to speed. Whereas when you hire a contractor, there's a lot more upfront setup work. You have to essentially specify exactly how they're going to do the work, when they're going to do the work, and you need all your ducks in a row: resources, assets, contracts. All of that thing needs to be set up front because you're paying them presumably a much higher rate by hour in order to get started. So
what you're suggesting is we have to be actually organized, which is
you have to be more organized for sure when you hire a contractor than you do. It's almost like when I was running MC Squares and had to get contract manufacturers to build something for me, you have to define a spec on what they need to build. You kind of have to do the same thing with contractors, which you don't have to go to that level of detail with employees. Anyway, that's my first take on it.
Yes, but I beg to differ on one of his points. And
oh no! Oh wait, we don't allow dissension in the podcast.
So I beg to differ in that you said that it takes you have to be better prepared and better organized to hire a contractor. Well, it depends on the type of work and the type of person that you're hiring. Fair. But the part that you overlooked there, Anthony, is that when you hire a full-time employee, you've invested all this time into finding, vetting, recruiting them, right? And then you're not factoring in the time it's taking you for them to train themselves or for you to train them.
Right.
So if you're hiring somebody, let's say you need a part-time marketing person, marketing manager, let's say part-time, and you hire an independent consultant to help to do that for you on a part-time basis. Yes, they can still figure things out by talking to your team and talking to everybody else and your other vendors. And yes, you're going to be paying them by the hour, but I beg to differ that it might be less money or about the same money as the money you've just invested in hiring the full-time employee.
So let's start with kind of the biggest one that I think is conventional wisdom, at least that I would think about, which is I'm trying to build culture. I'm trying to build this engine of people that are passionate about coming and solving my problem. And then I want them thinking about My problem when they wake up in the morning, they go to bed at night. Do you still get that, or is it kind of a different approach when you go with a more contractor list?
I'd say you definitely get it, because that contractor is, as an employee, employees can get a little bit comfortable, right? The likelihood that they're going to get let go or laid off simply for being a little less than 100% is not very high.
Totally agree with that. I totally agree with that.
But when you're being hired on a contract basis for a statement of work or on an interim basis, you need to prove your worth all the time. So I don't necessarily agree that you're not going to get the commitment when you have a non-employee as part of your team.
Interesting. So I think there's two approaches here, and I think let's talk about each, which is the first one is taking somebody, if I've got a full-time job, let's say, and I've got a lot of work to do, is bringing somebody in and doing maybe a contract to hire relationship. Is that something you would recommend? I think I like that approach because it's like dating before you get married.
I like that
for whatever
approach.
reason. Yeah, it's easier to terminate a contract. Like nobody gets their feelings hurt when you're like, hey, look, the contract's, we're just not going to be able to do the contract anymore. Versus being like, hey, I'm sorry, we're going to let you go. Mechanically, they're the same thing, but for whatever reason, it seems to be easier.
Yes, and I like it as I call it, try before you buy. So a lot of people are really good talkers, or they present well, or they can get through an interview process really brilliantly, and then you work with them for 2 weeks, and you're like, oh my goodness, what have we done?
That is literally the story of this podcast. Anthony, when we interviewed each other, we thought we were great.
Exactly, and now look.
Ooh, man, it's difficult. Yeah. So yeah, you get an opportunity to actually work with people. And Anthony, we talk about this all the time with being co-founders, is do a project together. Like actually get some stress in the equation to see how you react and see whether or not somebody that you really want to work with. And Liz, it sounds like that's a pretty smart approach for us as founders.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. And then earlier, Chris, you mentioned something about, are you sacrificing a strong culture by not having full-time employees? And I'm going to beg to differ with you on that too, because my first business, the Proco Agency, it's a multi-million-dollar business. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list twice. I don't have any employees and never have had any employees. And I've had the same team for, 5 to 10 years. And they're literally running the company. I've promoted myself to CEO. I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations anymore. They run the company. All of them are on a fractional basis, and they're committed to the growth of the company. We have a very strong culture. We trust each other immensely, and none of them are employees.
It is kind of like we said in the opening. It's almost rethinking some of these just ideas that we've had from the beginning of business, which is you have to hire people, you have to put them on payroll, et cetera. Right. So the second piece of this is, one is, okay, try before you buy. The second one is, I've got all these jobs to do. Anthony, our traditional approach is to go out and try to find a generalist, somebody that can do a lot of things. But I think what you're saying, Liz, is that we can go out and hire a fractional marketing person, a fractional ops person, and just sort of have them all around the table. Is it a smarter approach for us to do that?
It's a less risky approach, because you're not committing to hiring a single person and possibly overpaying a person. Plus, when you hire a generalist, you're literally getting a generalist. And when you're trying to grow a business, whether it's through more marketing or better processes, or by building a better culture or having the right HR mechanisms in place, you want to hire a specialist.
Anthony, tell me, have you done either of the approaches? Obviously, you and I both made bad hires. We've gone out and said, "Oh, this person's going to be perfect," and then had to fire them, way sooner than we should have, based on probably poor interviewing or not contracting before they buy. But have you ever started to really piece together a group of contractors that kind of become part of your full-time team?
No, so back when I ran an agency, there was a good contingency of contractors that we engaged in addition to full-time employees. There is kind of a challenge in the try before you buy approach, because at least in some circumstances, really top tier, the best employees that we had, I wouldn't have been able to hire them as a contractor to start. They had good jobs. They were doing really well. They're very valuable employees at the places they were at. So I couldn't ask them to take a risk and be a contractor before we brought them on. So when you're looking for, in your model, Liz, it totally works, right? But in some circumstances, you're not going to be able to get the specific talent that you want. It's not to say that you can't find great talent as contractors. You absolutely can. And I think it's just a different way of working. But I've never done what you did, which is like there's an employee of one, and that's you, and then everybody else is. I'm curious how you get around the employment laws when somebody's working full time as a contractor.
I didn't say they were full time.
Okay, I just wanted you to say that out loud, because that's what I figured. I just want for the audience, I just wanted to make sure that you know that if you hire somebody as a contractor and they're exclusively your contractor, at some point the government's going to say, no, they're an employee. You're trying to get around paying their Social Security and all of that stuff. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I am actually an expert in compliance and employment law. My life partner is an employment attorney, so he's over the last 18 years we've been together. It's like been my mini law school, actually. So let's talk about this a little bit. It's getting more complicated to legally hire somebody as an independent contractor, depending on which state you're in.
Right.
California is the toughest, because they have a law that was enacted about 4 years ago now. It was called AB 5. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but it has different tests to see if somebody is a full-time employee or can be classified as a contractor. And one of the things, there's two things that are primary. One is who's controlling the work. So when you hire somebody as an independent contractor, they need to be in control of how and when they do their work. You can't tell them to show up at a certain time, wear a certain outfit, do it a certain way, and you're directing their work. They need to be hired as an employee. Okay, so that's number one. The other thing that is that they need to be set up and hold themselves out for business with others, right? So ideally, they will have other clients at the same time. So that's how I run my other business, the Proco agency. Is the 4 people that are on my team all have other clients. So it's perfectly legit that I can pay them as fractional executives, basically, is what they are, and they have other clients. The trickiest part of the new California law is this part that talks about you can't hire somebody as an independent contractor if they are in the same line of work as you. So if you run a boutique consulting firm and you deliver consulting services, technically in California, you cannot hire a consultant as a subcontractor to deliver work to your clients. So that is the tricky part.
Only in California, and probably soon to come to Colorado, but only in California is that a thing. That's really bizarre.
Really jacked up. It's very jacked up. Yes.
I want to change gears with you guys for a second. Just ask about the idea of management, which is the other conventional wisdom is, hey, when you bring in contractors, and Anthony, you touched on this before. Sometimes I think I'm going to be saving time and money, et cetera. But knowing the fact that there may be arm's length from my customers, et cetera, in your experience, Liz, is it more difficult or challenging to, we got to be careful because we're not managing it, right? We're accepting work and then giving them feedback and then, delivering that to customers. Is it harder to do that with a contractual relationship, or does it matter?
I'd say it doesn't matter. It's all a degree of trust and communication.
Got it.
So
So it's
so I've had my CFO who's now being promoted to president. She's been partnering with me for, I don't know now, 10, 12 years. And we have such a high degree of trust that we've just built up over time. It doesn't matter that she's technically not an employee or if she was.
Contractors can have titles legally.
What's the question? That contractors can have.
So your fractional contractor is president. Somehow that's not sitting in my brain correctly. How can those two things be true at the same time?
I think you can call them anything you want.
Call them anything you want.
Just don't call me late for dinner, Anthony. That's the only thing.
I want to get into the legal stuff on this, which we can go into a rabbit hole, but can an officer of a company not be an employee? I guess the answer is yes.
Yes, she is an officer of my company.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually.
I've been doing it wrong, Chris. I've been doing it all wrong.
It's funny. And this is kind of the place where my brain is just being pulled to, which is, okay, what would it look like if we completely reimagined startups and we reimagined an early stage company and we reimagined this, and we could theoretically build entire businesses, scalable companies with just part-time contractors in this. It's almost too big of a paradigm shift for me to even get my arms wrapped around just in this moment. It's like,
It's possible, but you would need a good employment lawyer to guide you because it depends on the type of company and business, right? If you're a company that's manufacturing a product, yeah, you can outsource the manufacturing of that product to, a trusted partner. So you might not need employees in that situation. Let's say you're in the restaurant business, then you got a problem, right?
Yeah,
because
all my servers are independent contractors.
And
that would be strange.
And your cooks, yes, that would be a little bit tricky, right?
I can't tell my servers what time to show up.
Exactly.
It's really difficult, for me to actually run that business. Talk a little bit about, we've been sort of playing this hypothetical of saying just contractors for a business, but in your experience with the businesses you've worked with, how do you mix that actual employee to contractor mix and ratio, and how do you think about it? And Anthony, following up after Liz, how would you think about it? So go ahead, Liz.
So traditionally, it's been related to consulting or problem solving work. You have an opportunity that you need to seize, or you have a problem you want to fix. And your internal team doesn't have the bandwidth or the know-how to solve this particular problem. So traditionally, you would go hire a consultant or a consulting firm to help you with this defined situation. It might take 3 weeks, might take a year, depends. But you would hire somebody externally to solve that one particular problem. It would be very well defined. Similar to what Anthony started this whole conversation with saying, you need to have your ducks in a row and do some planning in advance. What are the specs? What are you trying to solve for, right? So that's traditional, and that's works obviously still happening. But now you can also do more the fractional leadership roles. That's becoming more and more popular. So particularly with small companies that are growing, you might not be able to afford the talent you need full time. So let's say you need a head of HR. You might not be able to afford a VP of HR, a head of HR full time, but you can afford that person 1 day a week. So it becomes a lot more flexible.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I think the point where you're actually saying, okay, maybe the people that do the work are employees, but your leadership team, the people that figure out the strategy and figure out what needs to be done, those are difficult positions and they're expensive positions to fill. Maybe that's the right people to bring in. Anthony, and react to that. So maybe I don't, I hire a marketing implementer, but then I bring in a fractional CMO, and maybe I maybe I hire a coder, but I bring in a fractional architect or CTO. What are your thoughts?
It feels. So I've never done it. So I'm trying to figure out why my immune system is fighting against it.
Because it's changed. That's
It's
why.
well, it's not changed. Like I really love the concept. The things I guess I would love to try it out. Right, the things that I would hedge against, the things I'd be concerned about going in, is one, culture. I very much care about culture. So culture fit is going to be, if not as important, more important in that circumstance. The second would be, are employees going to respect a fractional as much as they respect a full time? And I think the answer is, if you have the right employees, they should. So, I'm kind of walking through the logic tree in my head of like, what are the things that I would be concerned about? Those are the two things that I would be. I'm probably missing stuff though, Chris. What do you think?
Well, here's the stat that is just and again, I'm kind of like you. This is really different than my conventional wisdom, but
Right.
It says only 50% of businesses survive the first 5 years, right? But businesses with flexible workforce models show 21% higher profitability than traditional models. And that's a Deloitte 2023 global human capital.
Oh, if Deloitte says it, it has to be true.
I know, it's exactly. It actually makes sense, right? Because what you're trying to do, and particularly early in your company, is create optionality. And oftentimes employees, whether or not, even though we say fire fast, Anthony, it becomes kind of a sunk cost fallacy. If you hire somebody, you sometimes end up sticking with that person and that strategy. Where, Liz, what you're saying there is, if you have the ability to go out and pick and choose contractors, you can go try different lines of businesses. You can try different approaches. You can experiment and get in and get out a little bit faster than that. Is that accurate, Liz?
Yes, it's a lot more flexible. And also as a starting business, it's about cash flow, right? So I think this is why a lot of businesses don't make it to the 5 years, is they can't manage their cash flow properly. They might hire their leadership team too fast, and then they got this burden of these salaries, when really if they had a fractional marketing executive for 10 hours a week, it would have cost them a fifth as much, or whatever the math works out to be. But Anthony, you asked a question about, well, what about the culture and how would my employees feel about reporting to somebody on a fractional basis who's not an employee? Nobody knows how everybody else is paid. Why would they know that this person's being paid on a 1099 contract basis versus a W-2 basis? That they don't need to know.
It's a really fair point, and the entrepreneur in me wants this to work. Desperately believes that this is the right way to go. I'm absolutely going to test this model. It's a really interesting model. I wonder where my head is going is, instead of even paying contractors a rate to jump in, why not treat it even more entrepreneurial and say, you can be part of our consulting firm and you eat what you kill, right? So instead of paying you as a contractor, I pay you a cut of the business that you bring in, a lion's share of the cut of the business that you bring in. So it doesn't even cost you anything to bring in a fractional salesperson, because they're on commission, basically. They're on commission. Or if you're a consultant, you get a lion's share of what you earn, but you get the credibility of being aligned with the bigger firm. It's a really bizarre sideways way of looking at it, and I kind of really like it, Chris. I'm converting in real time. Everybody's watching me like, he was against, and now he's pro. Like that's kind of what's happening.
All right,
okay, but there's also a hybrid solution too. So I mentor through the Professional Independent Consultants of America, PICA. I mentor thousands of people in being self-employed. And a lot of people at some point, their rate, if they're charging hourly, gets to be too much per hour. And there's just an invisible glass ceiling. And so I start to advise people to look towards hybrid pricing. So what if you
Yeah.
lowered your hourly rate, but you had skin in the game, whether that's stock options or a percentage of sales or whatever the case is, or so you're still making some cash flow. This is from the consultant's perspective or the independent person's perspective. They still get some cash flow, but they have skin in the game for the company. That's a win-win for both sides, I think.
I think you've converted us. I think it's you can just see our minds expanding in real time. But let's just talk about mechanically. So I'm a founder and I want to go try this. I want to try to bring in more hybrid employees. I want to bring in maybe some more contractors, et cetera. Walk me through the decision points that I need to start making. It sounds like you've already mentioned it. First thing I have to do is clearly define the jobs that need to be done. Is that right?
Well, you don't necessarily need to spell it all out. You can start to have exploratory conversations. So let's go back to the marketing example. So I really think we need, a chief marketing officer. We can't afford one full time, but we need to have better strategy because we're doing all these various marketing tactics and we don't really have a cohesive strategy. We could really use some smarts and some brains to help us pull this together, but we don't just want a consultant. We really want somebody part of the team longer term. Okay, well, maybe we should hire an fractional CMO. Okay, so then you probably have some things penciled out, right? Like, for example, we need better strategy. We need better mechanisms for tracking our results or our effectiveness, whatever these few things are. Then you can go interview a few people and say, listen, I don't have this all specced out. How would you approach this if you were in my position?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Chris. Like, I wouldn't even spec out the job description. I wouldn't even do a job description. If I were to approach this like raw, I would say this is the outcome the business is looking for. This is what we need as a company. Let the fractional expert come in and tell you how you're going to do it, right? So in the interview process, you can let them tell you how they're going to achieve your outcomes. One, are they ludicrous? Are they ludicrous expectations? And two, you get to see how they think through the problem that you're having, and probably makes you a smarter interviewer as you start looking at fractional folks. I would define outcomes and not job responsibilities. That's how I would do it.
I think it's a smart approach. I mean, so last question, and then we'll go into speed round, Liz, which is, I know how to hire people. I know how to put a job post on Indeed and on LinkedIn and get interviews and look at resumes and things like that. But even what you just said, Anthony, which is you have to take a different approach here. You have to go and start to say, okay, I'm just going to look at the problem. And I've got this pain point. How do I find the right people to come in? How do I find the right contractors, agencies, whatever, to come in and help solve these problems?
Yes, well, there's lots of ways to find the right people, right? So you've got the platforms, the big platforms out there that are connecting companies with talent. The biggest one is Catalant, Catalant. Then there's also Graphite, and there's Talmix that was just acquired by some other company. But anyway, there's lots of these platforms. They take a cut, 20%. No, I think it's actually up to 25% now.
Wow.
So they do matchmaking mostly through algorithm, keyword searches, through the AI, whatever it is that they use. Then you've got boutique agencies. You've got one of the ones that pops into my mind is called Business Talent Group, BTG. They're also very good at matching people to positions on interim fractional consulting basis. Then you've got another new thing that's gaining more and more traction. It's not that new, but it's LinkedIn Services Marketplace. So sometimes, in fact, I think one of your two profiles actually says services listed. So you can go into LinkedIn Services Marketplace and put in terms like fractional CMO, and you can reach out to these people directly, or the person that's handling your fractional HR can do it for you. And just through your network. So most solopreneurs find their work through referrals and word of mouth. So you want to know somebody, if you want to hire somebody that has been referred to you, you're more likely to trust that this person is of some good, right? Because they have what you guys would call social proof. But if somebody's giving you a personal referral for an interim or fractional chief marketing officer, and they'll say, oh my gosh, you need to talk to Debbie. She's really the best. You're going to probably have a conversation with Debbie.
That's why we don't get these jobs, Anthony. It's because nobody actually recommends us after we get done.
Getting a job requires looking for one. Maybe I should start looking for one before I worry about getting one.
That's a great point. All right, Liz, let's go to the speed. Liz, are you ready for the speed round? Be exciting. All right. Should you have contractors sign NDAs, or is your business model the real protection?
NDAs.
Is it better to find specialists through platforms or build your own network?
Build your own network. It's less expensive.
Should founders pay contractors more than market rate or exactly at market?
Every situation is negotiable.
Is it smarter to have many specialized contractors or few multi-skilled contractors?
I'd go with the specialists.
Should you bring your best contractors in-house eventually or keep them independent?
You could try to bring them internally, but good luck with that.
Yeah, sometimes they want to stay independent. Excellent. This has been a great conversation. I kind of have my brain is kind of expanded here, Anthony. I think I'm starting to think about it. What did you learn today, Anthony?
I'm at I'm trying to wrap my head around it still. So I think Liz has really convinced me to try this as a business model. So this does require a kind of a total mindset shift of what we're taught as, when I say taught as entrepreneurs, what we're led to believe. It's not like went to entrepreneur school. Contractors have to, what I like about it is contractors have to earn their keep every billing cycle, which is a really good for the business. It's really good for the contractor because they get to keep their own hours. It's kind of set up in its requirement. And it's this, and I don't think, and not only does it require a mindset shift for the company, you're going to need to find non-traditional people, unique team members that are willing to operate under this model. If you can find that and make it work, I think this is a really interesting way to pursue your next new hire.
Yeah, I wonder, I'm just thinking now, it's like, oh, well, maybe serial entrepreneurs should just start 4 or 5 companies at a time and just go out and get country. Anyway,
I've started 2 on this show right now. Like I've already.
Yeah, exactly. You've already owned the brand.
I'm in Illustrator. You can't see it, but I'm in Illustrator. Build the logo.
Deep dive recommendations. Company of One by Paul Jarvis. The E-Myth Revisited always by Michael Gerber. Working with the Gig Economy by Thomas Malone. And there's a great article from Harvard Business Review called The Rise of the Super Temp. And that's by Jody Miller. Liz, any other recommendations, and where can we connect with you?
Liz has a book too.
Oh, you do? Tell us about your book. Oh, let's see it. I love it. Succeeding as a Solopreneur. Outstanding. Where can we find this book?
So you can find it any place books are sold. On Amazon, of course, it's ebook, paperback, or audiobook. But the easiest way to remember is to go to 6keys.info. That's the landing page for the book. And to find me, or to find more about the Professional Independent Consultants of America, or to find more about the Proco Agency, anything we've talked about is 6keys.info, not .com, because that was too expensive.
We're controlling our costs here.
Yes.
I like it.
6keys.info.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for the time today, Liz. Very, very interesting conversation. I think we need to go read your book, and then I think Anthony and I need to just scratch our heads a little bit.
I on my to-do list this year is to read a book all the way through. I've never done that before, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, that's not true. The ones without pictures.
Dr. Seuss counts. Dr. Seuss counts.
Fair enough.
Liz, thank you so much for jumping on. Like you have made Chris and I scratch our heads a little bit. In a good way. For those of you tuning in, be sure to check Liz out on LinkedIn and follow us. Just go to howtofounder.com to follow us on all the tubes and internets and webs. Tomorrow morning, we're going to talk about understanding financial statements and organizational design with our guest, Sarah Webb. She's going to be great. Looking forward to that too. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.